In this video, I will speak about how in the present moment I analyze stocks. Every process of choosing stocks is very individual, and my process is adapted to me, and it is more suitable for stocks that are profitable, and maybe is not the best scenario for choosing stocks that have a more growth perspective. I think the important is whatever method you choose, that you always choose the same method. What I'm speaking about is when you choose a metric, and all metrics have benefits and defects, but when you choose a metric, over time, analyzing hundreds of stocks, you will realize difference, for instance, in that criteria that you choose. If you are always changing the criteria, you don't have the benefit of looking at that criteria in hundreds of stocks. The first step is always when you choose some stock by a specific reason. I choose stocks based on several criteria. Maybe it's some company that I heard about. Maybe it's some stock that I read in the newspaper. Maybe some other investor speaks about that stock. Maybe it's some brand that I get in touch recently, so I want to see. Maybe I'm traveling and I get in touch with some product or service from a new company. So that is the first step. Then I go to the next step, and is looking at that stock, choosing some criteria. Most of the time, I have a fundamental reason. Is a company I like, a sector I like, a geography I like, some macro tendency that I see in the horizon. So I have a fundamental reason. I can have a technical reason, but most of the time I have a fundamental reason and a fundamental scenario in which I choose to look at that stock. The criteria I choose to analyze that stock, I like to write it, although I use some software where I put this data in order to be able to relate the data more easily. And I use Airtable, which is something I like to use not only for investing, but also for organizing several aspects of my private and personal life. After choosing, I go to some kind of site, a website. I like to use simply Wall Street, which is a paid service, but there are several free services. Yahoo Finance, you can go to investing.com, and you look at the company data. Let's look at some company, Tesla, for instance. Although I read all the data, there are some criteria that I choose. The first one is, you can say it's conservative, but I always like to look at the PE ratio. This value here, P ratio. Then I also look at price to sales ratio. And the third value is the net profit margin. The aspect that I look at is this company doesn't have is the dividend, and I also look at the price to book ratio. Most of the time when I look at the P ratio, I also write it down, the forward P ratio. After this, I look at the valuation of the company in terms of the discount to cash flow model, if it's overvalued or not overvalued. So I also look at the price target that the company has for the next year. Most of the models that analyze price targets also are based with a discount to cash flow model. So when you have target prices most of the times you are looking at if this company is overvalued or undervalued under a discount to cash flow model. The next step, I compare with other target prices perspectives. Most of them are similar, but sometimes you find different values. So I like to use it, the Wall Street Journal or the Financial Times, and I look at the target price in Financial Times. When I do this, as you saw, I put the name Tesla. In Financial Times and in Wall Street, it also gives me some recent information about an article. Sometimes at this point, I read these articles. This adds something to my fundamental perspective with more recent news. Sometimes the articles have a more broad and more long-term perspective, sometimes events, very specific events. And I also look at the forecast, and I see the differences between the two forecasts. And of course, when you see target prices, you have very, sometimes, for instance, in a company like Tesla, you have a medium of 12.6, but you have a low of 89.0. So sometimes the target prices are very broad. The next data is I look at the ESG score, since I recently adopt a more environmental perspective. So I'm going to see the score. Tesla has a 55 score in ESG. It's environmental, social, and governance, with an industry average of 51. And finally, the final step is I go and see the technical analysis from the chart. You see that here the stock is currently at a point where historically it has been a support and resistance in this summer, but also in last year. In my next videos, I will analyze the stocks that are in my portfolio or other stocks that I consider interesting. If you have any suggestion of any stock, I might run this process in the way I'm looking at more securities. My name is Pedro Nunes. I am an eToro Popular investor. You can check my portfolio in the link that I will put in the description. And I hope to see you again soon.